But we do start in Lansing, where a lack of action by state lawmakers has renewed calls for a part-time legislature. And some of the blame can be placed on term limits. Lawmakers just aren't around long enough to become knowledgeable on the issues. MiWeek contributor Nolan Finley endorsed a part-time legislature in his Detroit News column. He started an online petition campaign, and that is where we start tonight with Nolan and our contributor Stephen Henderson
how many signatures
of the Detroit Free Press. All right, this is exciting, Nolan. This is high-tech, change.org. So tell us what was behind this whole thing.
Well, I mean, it's a building frustration, not just on my part, but I think on a lot of people, that this legislature can't seem to get anything done. And it's not just this session. This has been a long time brewing. Term limits have destroyed the quality of lawmaking in this state. As you said in the lead-in, these folks aren't around long enough to develop any expertise in governing, in deal-making, in understanding what they can and can't do under the Constitution, and what it takes to act in the best interests of the state. They're always looking ahead to their next job. They're at the mercy of lobbyists and staff. And I just think term limits have been a disaster, but we're stuck with them unless we replace them with something else. And I think the only thing voters would accept as an adequate replacement for term limits is a part-time legislature. I don't think they're going to lift term limits as a standalone proposal or even modify them. So, you know, my idea for fixing this is to get a ballot proposal on the 2016 ballot, November, and change it. Let's fix this thing. We know it's broken.
Stephen, how many times have you signed this online petition?
Like 50, under like different names and emails too. So.
John Smith, Steve Henderson.
So when they check them out, they'll be like, these are all fake. Yeah, no, I'm all in favor of part-time legislature. Most of the other states where I've worked, in fact, as a journalist, Kentucky and Maryland, both have part-time legislatures, and they work just fine. I mean, there is no reason for state legislatures to be there all year, and some of that is why you get these bizarre resolutions and things, laws that don't make any sense or are unconstitutional that lawmakers propose, because they have to be doing something all the time. I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure I think it should be done as a punitive measure, because this legislature is so ineffective. I mean, I think there are good reasons to think about part-time as one of the reforms that we need. Part-time, no term limits, getting rid of partisan redistricting. I think as a package, those things make a lot of sense. It would give us a more seasoned and mature legislature to deal with the problems that the state has.
All right, so that's at least one place to start, though. So what has the reaction been to you, Nolan?
Well, we've got over 5,000 as of Thursday morning, over 5,000 signatures. Pretty
really
strong
good.
reaction. Yeah, it's good for something like this.
I want to know how many voicemails you've had from lawmakers who are like, Finley, what are you doing? What are you trying to do to my job?
Actually, a former House Speaker called me and said, hey, sign me up. I'm on. I want part of this. There's no reason for them to be there full time. But most people aren't as concerned about the part-time legislature as they are term limits and the damage term limits done. And yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't do it to punish a specific legislative session for its ineptitude. That's just the opportunity to raise awareness.
Right. People
of the
are
problem.
focused.
I don't see it getting any better as long as we have term limits. And so, you know, there's some folks who want to sit down and meet and talk about how this becomes a ballot proposal in 2016. It's not a cheap proposition.
I was going to say, how does it become a ballot proposal?
Well, you have to get the folks with resources who are willing and able to fund a petition drive.
How much do you think that would take?
I don't think this one would take all that much, because I think there's a strong support for it, and that's what I wanted.
But how many million are we talking about, though?
2 to 5.
That depends on who opposes it. So there's a national group called PartTime something, Term Limit Nation or something like that. Term Limits of America. I don't know what they call themselves, but they go state to state advocating for term limits, and you know, the advantage they have is that it's not an issue in many states at one time. And so if we're the only state who's really looking at this next year, they could dump a lot of resources into Michigan to try to preserve term limits. That would raise the price on the pro side ballot measures can cost you $10, $20 million to really get something over that 50%.
Yeah, but I don't think the opposition from this group would be that well funded, and they might take a look at this and say, well, the part-time aspect of it is just as appealing as the term limits part. But our idea with the online petition, and that's at DetroitNews.com/legislature, you can find that. Our idea is simply to demonstrate that there is public support for a measure like this, and I think it's growing. And you mentioned redistricting. Just this week, a leader in the business community called me and said, what about making redistricting reform part of this? Yeah. And I thought his idea was very good. Reduce the total number of legislative districts, because our population has fallen since 1964. Go with 99 House districts, 33 Senate districts, and mandate that 3 House districts be contained wholly within each Senate district. That limits your gerrymandering possibility.
Okay, so which is easier to get done? Well, a ballot proposal for a part-time legislature or changing the districts?
Well, I mean, you do it all as one proposal, one legislative reform, but you would emphasize part-time. The rest of it would be sort of fine print.
Okay, let me ask about part-time and exactly how that would work, because when you think about part-time, does that maybe bring in people who don't take that job as seriously, or they have full-time jobs on the side that earn their money that would take precedence over being on a part-time legislature? Or would that also bring in people that are super rich who don't have to worry about a job on the side? So you have maybe that influence there, or you have people who are retired and older because they've got the time to be able to do things.
My experience is that it's a combination of all of those things. You get a lot of lawyers who are able to take that 3 months or whatever it is and be away from their jobs. You get doctors. In the Kentucky legislature, I remember there were lots of physicians who did that. You got to be careful too then with conflicts of interest. I mean, people who have careers can't be allowed to be up there making legislation that helps their businesses and things like that. It's not a cure-all. I mean, there is no perfect system. There are some things about it that I think people in states where it operates would say it doesn't quite work. I think the issue is this is a superior model to the one that we're working with now. It will eliminate a lot of the problems that we have, which I think are far worse, which is people coming and going, not developing any expertise or relationships. I mean, I think the Courser Gamrat thing, which is an outlier for sure.
Which is still dragging on.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at what they were doing, I mean, they went to the legislature to play house with one another. I mean, they combined their offices, and they're napping in each other's eye. I mean, this is not legislative behavior, and I think when you have inexperienced people going there with ideological motivations, you trend toward that kind of behavior as opposed to more serious lawmaking.
And you fill the time. Last week when they were there for 2 days, supposedly talking about a road deal, they introduced 54 pieces of legislation over 2 days, and this is nonstop, week after week throughout the year.
And it's stuff that even if it passed wouldn't make any difference, and some of it's not even constitutional, but they don't know that.
So why do they do it? They do it just to check the box and say, look what I just did?
Be able to go home and say, it's to be able to go home in a very short period of time, which they all have to. They got to run every 2 years and say, look what I did. I fought for this. I fought for you on this bizarre ideological issue that has nothing to do with the way the state runs.
So send me to the Senate or send me to Congress or make me county executive. It's always about the next political job. And if you look at this body, I mean, it looks like a college class, for goodness sake. We're churning through political talent so rapidly that the standard keeps lowering and lowering and lowering.
All right, so Nolan, this is not the first time that you've called for part-time legislature. No. It feels like over the last year or so, we've talked about this, it's kind of bubbled up on the surface. Do you think that now, especially what has happened with, or has not happened with the roads deal specifically, that there is finally traction with this movement, or is it something that we're going to be kind of mad about for the next 4 months and then it's not going to go anywhere?
The frustration of the business community with this inability to get a roads deal is enormous. And yes, I think that's the dynamic that's changing here. People have been talking about term limits and their impact and saying, oh my God, we got to do something about term limits, and nobody has. And I think finally folks are ready to do something.
All right, we can't leave Lansing without talking about Courser Game. Stephen, where are we again? The Free Press called this week for them to
again, the second time.
Yeah.
They should just leave.
As did Detroit News.
I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. They are going to have to leave at some point. The question now is whether you force some sort of hearing and prolonged process.
Well, there is a report saying that that looks like they did something, but yet we don't see that. We haven't seen that.
You know, I don't see the point in belaboring this. I mean, it's clear that whatever the magnitude of what they did, it was wrong. And the part of it that makes them unable to serve is using the resources of their offices to cover up their personal behavior. You cannot do that. We have a long history in this state of people who've done that and had to go. I don't see why they would be any different.
And the outright lying since they were discovered. I mean,
well, that's
they were
also
out,
true.
Gamrat's attorney and her private investigator were out yesterday blaming one of our reporters, or accusing one of our reporters, one of the best reporters in this state, of trying to blackmail him. I mean, they are liars. They are cheats. They're hypocrites. They've got no business in the legislature.
And as the world turns, let's hope
and that's the thing.
Something.
Decency at this point says you resign. You don't push this to some sort of dramatic hearing in the House and force a vote to expel you. I mean, that's a waste of everybody's time, and there's no doubt about the outcome. You will be out anyway.
And on your way out the door, stop and pick up Virgil Smith and take him with you.
Oh well, that's different. That's a different discussion altogether.